Darling angel, closer than my friend when you're in need, baby. Life is one big room when you have. Morning, guys. Good morning, everybody. This is Trev from Trev Essence. And today, the day before Valentine's, actually, we are going to continue the reading of Prince Harry's book called Spare. For those of you who are new here, a very, very special welcome to you. And to all my returning travelers, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now, we are now on to part 12 of this book. We have been reading over the last week, I think. Yeah, about a week now since we started reading this book. We are going to continue. We're just about halfway through onto page 213 of 410. So we are well on our way to finishing this book, and I hope you all are enjoying the reading as much as I am enjoying bringing it to you. Once again, I want to thank you all. I see that you all have been watching, have been listening, and I am absolutely grateful for you all. Now let's move on to chapter 54. In the last chapter, we read about Harry being back at war after 4 years and climbing into his um his airplane, him and his buddy, and chasing some what was believed to be some Taliban fighters, but not getting the go ahead from the ground to fire until it was just about too late. And he only ended up getting one of them, and the others got away. So now we're going to move on to chapter 54. Let me see why this is like it is. Hold on. Oops. Okay, now I've fixed it. So let us continue with chapter 54. One of our drones had been watching the Taliban school its fighters. Despite popular assumptions, the Taliban had got equipment, and they had good equipment, nothing like ours, but good, effective when used correctly. So they often needed to bring their soldiers up to speed. There were frequent tutorials in the desert, instructors demonstrating the newest gear from Russia and Iran. That was what this lesson captured by the drones seemed to be, a shooting lesson. The red phone rang. Down went the coffee mugs and PlayStation controls. We ran to the Apaches, flew north at a good clip, 25 feet off the ground. Darkness was starting to fall. We were ordered by controllers to hold off, about 8 kilometers. In the deepening twilight, we could barely see the target area, just shadows moving about, bikes leaning against a wall. Wait, we were told. We circled and circled. Wait. Shallow breaths. Now came the signal. The shooting lesson is over. Giddy up, go, go, go. The instructor, the high value target, was on a motorbike, one of his students on the back. We screamed towards them, clocked them moving along at 40 kilometers per hour, one of them carrying a hot barreled PKM machine gun. I held my thumb over the cursor, watched the screen, waited. There! I pulled the trigger to fire the pointing laser, and another to fire the missile. The thumbstick I fired was remarkably similar to the thumbstick for the PlayStation game I'd just been playing. The missile just hit short of the motorbike's spokes. Textbook, exactly where I'd been taught to aim. Too high, you might end up over the top of his head. Too low, you'd take out nothing but dirt and sand. Delta Hotel, direct hit. I followed up with the 30 millimeter. Where the motorbike had been was now a cloud of smoke and flames. Well done, Dave said. We swooped back to camp, critiqued the video. Perfect kill. We played some more PlayStation, turned in early. That's what war is about. I don't see why the press is making such a big deal about Harry having done what he does as a soldier. Like, come on now. Chapter 55. It can be hard to be precise with hellfires. Apaches fly with such tremendous speed that it's hard to take steady aim. Hard for some anyway. I developed pinpoint accuracy, and if I was throwing darts, as if I was throwing darts in a pub. My targets were moving too fast. The speediest motorbike I shot was going about 50 kilometers per hour. The driver, a Taliban commander who had been calling in fire all day on our forces, was hunched over the handlebars, looking back as we gave chase. He was purposely speeding between villages, using civilians for cover. Old people, children, they were mere props to him. Our windows of opportunity were those 1 minute spans where he was between villages. I remember Dave calling out, "You have got 200 meters till it's a no-go," meaning 200 meters until this Taliban commander was hiding behind another child. I heard Dave again. "You have got three. You have got three coming in on the left, wall on the right." Roger that, sir. Dave moved us into the 5 o'clock position, dropped to 600 feet. Now! I took the shot. The hellfire smacked the motorbike, sent it flying into a small patch of trees. Dave flew us over the trees, and through plumes of smoke, we saw a ball of fire and the bike, but nobody. I was ready to follow up with the 30 millimeter strafe and strafe the area, but I couldn't see anything to strafe. We circled and circled and circled some more. I was getting nervous. Did he get away, mate? There he was, 50 feet to the right of the motorbike, body on the ground. Confirmed. Away we flew. Chapter 56. 3 times we were called to do the same forlorn place. A string of bunkers overlooking a busy highway. We had intel that Taliban fighters were routinely gathering there. They came in 3 cars, jalopies, carrying RPGs and machine guns, took up positions and waited for lorries to come down the road. Controllers had seen them blow up at least one convoy. There were sometimes half a dozen men, sometimes as many as 30. Taliban, clear as day. But 3 times we flew there to engage, and 3 times we failed to get permission to fire. We never knew why. This time we were determined things would be different. We got there fast, saw a lorry coming down the road, saw the men taking aim, but things were about to happen. And bad they were. That lorry's doomed, we said, unless we do something. We requested permission to engage. Permission denied. We asked again. Ground control. Permission requested. Requesting permission to engage hostile target. Stand by. Stand by. Boom! A huge flash and an explosion on the road. We screamed for permission. Stand by. Waiting for ground commander clearance. Stand by. We went screaming in, saw the lorry blow to pieces, saw the men jumping into their jalopies and onto motorbikes. We followed 2 motorbikes. We begged for permission to fire. Now we were requesting a different kind of permission, not permission to stop an act, but permission to address an act just witnessed. This kind of permission was called 429 Alpha. Do we have 429 Alpha to engage? Stand by. We kept following the 2 motorbikes through several villages while griping about the bureaucracy of war, the reluctance of higher-ups to let us do what we had been trained to do. Maybe in our griping, we were no different from soldiers in every war. We wanted to fight. We didn't understand larger issues, underlying geopolitics, big picture. Some commanders often said, publicly and privately, that they feared every Taliban killed would create 3 more. So they were extra cautious. At times, we felt the commanders were right. We were creating more Taliban, but there had to be a better answer than floating nearby while innocents got slaughtered. 5 minutes became 10, became 20. We never did get permission. That's the art of war. That is what it is. Welcome again to my channel, guys, and welcome to this morning's reading of the book Spare by Prince Harry. We are about halfway through this book, and we are going to continue until we are done, just about an hour each morning. We are now moving on to chapter 57 of part 2. Every kill was on video. The Apache saw all. The camera in its nose recorded all. So after every mission, there would be a careful review of that video. Returning to Bastion, we'd walk into the gun tape room, slide the video into a machine, which would project the kill onto wall-mounted plasma TVs. Our squadron commander would press his face against the screens, examining, murmuring, wrinkling his nose. He watched me. He wasn't merely looking for errors. This chap, he was hungry for them. He wanted to catch us in a mistake. We called them. I see people here. Welcome, guys. Thank you all for coming. We called him awful names when he wasn't around. We came close to calling him those names to his face. Look, whose side are you? Look, whose side are you on? But that was what he wanted. He was trying to provoke us, to get us to say the unspeakable. Why? Jealousy, we decided. It ate him up inside that he had never pulled a trigger in battle. He had never attacked the enemy. So he attacked us. Despite his best efforts, he never found anything irregular in any of our kills. I was part of 6 missions that ended in the taking of human life, and they were all deemed justified by a man who wanted to crucify us. I deemed them the same. What made the squadron commander's attitude so execrable was this: he was exploiting a real and legitimate fear, a fear we all shared. Afghanistan was a war of mistakes, a war of enormous collateral damage, thousands of innocents killed and maimed, and that always haunted us. So my goal from the day I arrived was never to go to bed doubting that I had done the right thing, that my targets had been correct, that I was firing on Taliban and only Taliban, no civilians nearby. I wanted to return to Britain with all my limbs, but more, I wanted to go home with my conscience intact, which meant being aware of what I was doing and why I was doing it at all times. Most soldiers can't tell you precisely how much death is on their ledger. In battle conditions, there's often a great deal of indiscriminate firing. But in the age of Apaches and laptops, everything I did in the course of 2 combat tours was recorded, timestamped. I could always say precisely how many enemy combatants I had killed, and I felt it vital never to shy away from that number. Among the many things I learned in the army, accountability was near the top of the list. So, my number, 25. It wasn't a number that gave me any satisfaction, but neither was it a number that made me feel ashamed. Naturally, I'd have preferred not to have that many on my military CV, on my mind, but by the same token, I'd have preferred to live in a world in which there was no Taliban, a world without war. Even for an occasional practitioner of magical thinking like me, however, some realities just can't be changed. While in the heat and fog of combat, I didn't think of those 25 as people. You can't kill people if you think of them as people. You can't really harm people if you think of them as people. They were chess pieces removed from the board, bads taken away before they could kill goods. I'd been trained to otherwise then trained well. On some level, I recognized this learned detachment as problematic, but I also saw it as an unavoidable part of soldiering, another reality that couldn't be changed. Not to say that I was some kind of automation. I never forgot being in that TV room at Eton, the one with the blue doors, watching the Twin Towers melt as people leaped from the roofs and high windows. I never forgot the parents and spouses and children I met in New York, clutching photos of the moms and dads who had been crushed and vaporized or burnt alive. September 11 was vile, indelible, and all those responsible, along with their sympathizers and enablers, their allies and successors, were not just our enemies, but enemies of humanity. Fighting them meant avenging one of the most heinous crimes in world history and preventing it from ever happening again. As my tour neared its end, around Christmas of 2012, I had questions and qualms about the war, but none of these was moral. I still believed in the mission, and the only shots I thought twice about were the ones I hadn't taken. For instance, the night we were called in to help some Gurkhas, they were pinned down by a nest of Taliban fighters, and when we arrived, there was a breakdown in communications, so we simply weren't able to help. It haunts me still, hearing my Gurkha brothers calling out on the radio, remembering every Gurkha I'd known and loved being prevented from doing anything. As I fastened my bags and said my goodbyes, I was honest with myself. I acknowledged plenty of regrets, but they were the healthy kind. I regretted the things I hadn't done, the Brits and Yanks I hadn't been able to help. I regretted the job not being finished, not at most of all, I regretted that it was time to leave. Chapter 58. I stuffed my Bergen full of dusty clothes, plus plus two souvenirs, a rug bought in a bazaar, a 30mm shell casing from the Apache. The first week of 2013, before I could get onto the plane with my fellow soldiers, I went into a tent and sat in the one empty chair. The obligatory exit interview. The chosen reporter asked what I had done in Afghanistan. I told him. He asked if I had fired on the enemy. What? Yes. His head went back, surprised. What did you think we were doing over there? Selling magazine subscriptions? He asked if I had killed anyone. Yes. Again, surprised. I tried to explain. It's a war, mate, you know. It's a war. The conversation came around to the peers. I told the reporter that I thought the British press was crap, particularly with regard to my brother and sister-in-law, who had just announced that they were pregnant and were subsequently being besieged. They deserve to have their baby in peace, I said. I admitted that my father had begged me to stop thinking about the press, to not read the papers. I admitted that I felt guilty every time I did because it made me complicit. Everyone's guilty for buying the newspaper, but hopefully no one actually believes what's in them. I guess. But of course they did. People did believe, and that was the whole problem. Britons, among the most literate people on the planet, were also the most credulous. Even if they didn't believe every word, there was always that residue of wonder. Where there's smoke, there must be fire. Even if a falsehood was disproved, debunked beyond all doubt, that residue of initial belief remained, especially if the falsehood was negative. Of all human biases, negativity bias in the most is the most indelible. It's baked into our brains. Privilege the negative, prioritize the negative. That's how our ancestors survived. That's what the bloody papers count on, I wanted to say, but didn't. It wasn't that kind of discussion. Wasn't a discussion at all. The reporter was keen to move on, to ask about Vegas. Naughty Harry, eh? Hooray, Harry. I felt a mix of complicated emotions about saying goodbye to Afghanistan, but I couldn't wait to say goodbye to this chap. First, I flew with my squadron to Cyprus for what the army called decompression. I hadn't had any mandated decompression after my last tour, so I was excited, though not as much as my bodyguards. Finally, we can have a bloody cold beer. Hey guys, what's up? Everyone was issued exactly 2 cans, no more. I didn't like beer, so I handed mine over to a soldier who looked like he needed it more than me. He reacted as if I had given him a Rolex. We were then taken to a comedy show. Attendance was quasi-mandatory. Whoever whoever organized it had had good intentions, but a bit of levity about a tour of hell. And to be fair, some of us did laugh, but most didn't. We were struggling and didn't know we were struggling. We had memories to process, mental wounds to heal, extens- existential questions to sort. We had been told that a padre was available if we needed to talk, but I remember no one going near him. So we just sat at the comedy show in the same way we had sat in the VHR tent, in a state of suspended animation, waiting. I felt bad for those comedians. One tough gig. Before we left Cyprus, someone told me I was all over the papers. Oh, yeah? The interview. Shit. I'd completely forgotten. Apparently, I'd caused quite a stir by admitting that I had killed people in a war. I was criticized up and down for being a killer and being blithed about it. I'd mentioned in passing that the Apache controls were reminiscent of video game controllers, and thus Harry compares killing to video game. I tell you, these people can really put a twist on things. I threw down the paper. Where was that padre? Welcome, guys. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Guys, you see, I'm up and I am here. I am reading here with you, for you, to you. Before I get off to go to work, I'm getting up in the next 30 minutes or so to get myself together and get out of here. But I thank you all so much for coming. Let's move right along. Chapter 59. I texted Cress, told her I was home. She texted back, said she was relieved, which made me relieved. I hadn't been sure what to expect. I wanted to see her, and yet we didn't make a plan. Not in that first exchange. There was some distance there, some stiffness. You sound different, Harry. Well, I don't feel different. I didn't want her to think I was different. A week later, some mates gave a dinner party. Welcome home, Spike, at my mate Arthur's place. Cress turned up with my cousin Eugenie, aka Huge. I hugged them both, saw the shock on their faces. They said I looked like a completely different person. Stockier, bigger, older. Yes, yes, all that. But also something else they couldn't name. Whatever it was, it seemed frightening or off-putting to Cressida. We agreed, therefore, that this wasn't a reunion. Couldn't be. Can't have a reunion with someone you don't know. If we wanted to keep seeing each other, and I certainly did, we'd have to start again. Hello, I'm Cress. Hello, I'm Haz. Nice to meet you. Chapter 60. I got up each day, went to the base, did my work, enjoyed none of it. It felt pointless and boring. I was bored to tears. More for the first time in years, I was without a purpose, a goal. What's next? I asked myself every night. I begged my commanding officers to send me back. Back where? To the war? Oh, they said, ha ha ha, no, no. In March 2013, word came down that the palace wanted to send me on another royal tour, my first since the Caribbean, this time America. I was glad for the break in the monotony. On the other hand, I was also worried about returning to the scene of the crime. I imagined days and days of questions about Vegas. No, palace courtiers assured me. Impossible. Time, time and the war had eclipsed Vegas. This was strictly a goodwill tour to promote the rehabilitation of wounded British and American soldiers. No one is going to mention Vegas, sir. Cut to May 2013. Me touring the devastation caused by Hurricane Sandy alongside New Jersey's Governor Chris Christie. The governor gifted me a blue fleece, which the press spun as his way of keeping me clothed. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Actually, Christie spun it that way too. A reporter asked him what he thought of my time in Vegas, and Christie vowed that if I spent the whole day with him, nobody's going to get naked. The line got a big laugh because Christie is famously stout. Before Jersey, I'd gone to Washington, D.C., met with President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama, visited Arlington National Cemetery, laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldiers. I'd laid dozens of wreaths before, but the ritual was different in America. You didn't place the wreath on the grave yourself. A white gloved soldier placed it with you, and then you laid your hand singly for one beat upon the wreath. Then this extra step, this partnering with another living soldier moved me. Holding my hand on the wreath for that extra second, I found myself a bit wobbly, my mind flooding with images of all the men and women with whom I had served. I thought about death, injury, grief, from the Helmand province to Hurricane Sandy to the Alma Tunnel, and I wondered how other people just got on with their lives, whereas I felt such doubt and confusion and something else. What? I wondered. Sadness? Numbness? I couldn't name it, and without being able to give it a name, I felt a kind of vertigo. What was happening to me? The whole American tour lasted only 5 days, a true whirlwind. So many sights and faces and remarkable moments. But on the flight home, I was thinking about only one part. A stop off in Colorado, something called the Warrior Games, a kind of Olympiad for wounded soldiers, with 200 men and women taking part, each of whom inspired me. I watched them closely, saw them having the time of their lives, saw them competing to the hilt, and I asked them how. Sport, they said, the most direct route to healing. Most were natural athletes, and they told me these games had given them a rare chance to rediscover and express their physical talent despite their wounds. As a result, it made their wounds, both mental and physical, disappear. Maybe only for a moment or a day, but that was enough. More than enough. Once you have made a wound disappear for any length of time, it's no longer in control. You are. Yes, I thought, I get that. And so, on the flight back to Britain, I kept going over those games in my mind, wondering if we could do something similar in Britain, a version of those warrior games, but perhaps with more soldiers, more visibility, more benefits to participants. I scribbled some notes on a sheet of paper, and by the time my plane touched down, I had the essential idea sketched out. Hey, 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 hey. Delia is in the house. Bless up, family. How are you doing? Yes, baby, I'm still reading. I'm reading, sis. I'm still reading. I got up this morning and I said, if I get up every morning and I do an hour, because I wake up at about 4 in the morning and I usually louse around, lay around, try to read something, do something. And then I said, you know what, if I'm going to be reading this book, may as well read when I get up in the morning, just like I would do with the Bible study, which I will resume. But I want to finish this one first. I'm going to finish this one first. Well, welcome, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to share out this one. This is part 12. And come on, guys, you can comment in the comment section so I can see that you are there and I can know specifically who I'm greeting this morning, like I'm greeting my family right there, daily up. All right, let's continue. A Paralympics for soldiers from all over the world in London's Olympic Park, where the London Olympics had just happened. With just support and cooperation from the palace, maybe. Big ask, but I felt that I'd accrued some political capital. Despite Vegas, despite at least one article that made me out to be some kind of war criminal, despite my whole checkered history as the naughty one, Britain seems to have a generally positive view of despair. There was a feeling that I was coming into my own. Plus, most Brits had a positive view of the military community overall, despite the unpopularity of the war. Surely they'd be supportive of an effort to help soldiers and their families. Hey sis, all that fluff and stuff. How are you doing, my love? How are you doing? Happy Monday to you. Day before Valentine's Day. How are you doing, sister? What's going on down under? The first step would be pitching the Royal Foundation Board, which oversaw my charitable projects and Willie's and Kate's. It was our foundation, so I told myself, no problem. After the calendar was on my side, this was early. Also, the calendar was on my side. This was early summer 2013. Willie and Kate's weeks from having their first child were going to be out of commission for a while. The foundation, therefore, didn't have any projects in the pipeline. Its roughly £7 million was just sitting there, doing nothing. And if these international warrior games worked, they'd enhance the foundation's profile, which would energize donors and replenish the foundation's accounts many times over. There'd be that much more to go around when Willie and Kate came back full time. So I was feeling extremely confident in the days leading up to my pitch. But when the actual day came, not so much. I realized how badly I wanted this for the soldiers and their families, and if I'm being honest, for myself. And this sudden attack of nerves kept me from being at my best. Still, I got through it, and the board said yes. I'm good. I've got this book and I couldn't put it down. Watch page number you're on. I am now on page 223. 223, my sister. Thrilled, I reached out to Willie, expecting him to be thrilled as well. He was sorely irritated. He wished I'd run all this by him first. My assumption, I said, was that other people had done so. He complained that I'd be using up all the funds in the Royal Foundation. That's absurd, I spluttered. I was told only a £500,000 grant would be needed to get the games going, a fraction of the foundation's money. Besides, it was coming from the Endeavour Fund, an arm of the foundation I'd created specifically for veterans' recovery. The rest would come from donors and sponsors. What was going on here? I wondered. Then I realized, my God, sibling rivalry. I put a hand over my eyes. Had we not got past this yet? The whole here versus spare thing? Wasn't it a bit late in the day for that tired childhood dynamic? But even if it wasn't, even if Willie insisted on being competitive, on turning our brotherhood into some kind of private Olympiad, he had been built up on insurmountable lead. He was married with a baby on the way, while I was eating takeaway alone over the sink. Oh my God. Pause, sink. I still lived with Pa. Come over, man. You win. Game over. Game over, man. You win. Oh my God. Let me see, guys. I'm watching the time, because y'all know I gotta get ready. All right, chapter 61. I expected magic. I thought this challenging, ennobling task of creating an international warrior games would propel me into the next phase of my post-war life. It didn't work out like that. Instead, day by day, I felt more sluggish, more hopeless, more lost. By the late summer of 2013, I was in trouble, toggling between bouts of debilitating lethargy and terrifying panic attacks. My official life was all about being in public, standing up in front of people, giving speeches and talks, doing interviews, and now I found myself nearly incapable of fulfilling these basic functions. Hours before a speech or public appearance, I'd be soaked with sweat. Then, during the event itself, I'd be unable to think, my mind buzzing with fear and fantasies of running away. Time and again, I just managed to stave off the urge to flee, but I could envisage a day when I wouldn't be able to, when I'd actually sprint off a stage or burst out of the room. Indeed, that day seemed to be coming and coming fast, and I could already picture the blaring headlines, which always made the anxiety 3 times worse. Thank you, my love. Oh, yes, don't text and drive. It's already Monday night. Oh, gosh, I forgot. I forgot that it's Monday night for you. I forgot. Good night, sis. Good night. You are getting ready for Valentine's Day. Okay. The panic often started with putting on a suit first thing in the morning. Strange. That was my trigger, the suit. As I buttoned up my shirt, I could feel my blood pressure soaring. As I knotted my tie, I could feel my throat closing. By the time I was pulling on the jacket, lacing the smart shoes, sweat was running down my cheeks and back. I'd always been sensitive to heat, like Pa. He and I would joke about it. We are not made for this world, we'd say. Bloody snowmen. The dinner room at Sandringham, for instance, was our version of Dante's Inferno. Much of Sandringham was balmy, but the dining room was subtropical. Pa and I would always wait for Granny to look away. Then one of us would jump up, sprint to a window, crack it an inch. Ah, blessed cool air. But the Corkies always betrayed us. The cool air would make them whimper, and Granny would say, "Is there a draught?" And then a footman would promptly shut the window. That loud thump, unavoidable because the windows were so old, always felt like the door of a jail cell being slammed. But now, every time I was about to make any kind of public appearance, no matter the venue, it felt like the Sandringham dinner room. During one speech, I became so overheated that I felt sure everyone was noticing and discussing it. During one drink reception, I searched frantically for anyone else who might be experiencing the same heat stroke. I needed some assurance that it wasn't just me, but it was. As is so often true of fear, mine metastasized. Soon it wasn't mere public appearances, but all public venues, all crowds. I came to fear simply being around other human beings. More than anything else, I feared cameras. I'd never liked cameras, of course, but now I couldn't abide them. The telltale click of a shutter opening and closing, it could knock me sideways for a whole day. I had no choice. I began staying home. Day after day, night after night, I sat around eating takeaway, watching 24 or Friends. I think I may have watched every episode of Friends in 2013. I decided I was a Chandler. My actual friends would comment in passing that I didn't see myself, as if I had flu. Sometimes I think maybe I'm not myself. Maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe this is some kind of metamorphosis. A new self is emerging, and I'm just going to have to be this new person, this frightened person for the rest of my days. Or maybe this had always been me, and it was only now becoming evident. My psyche, like water, had found its level. I ransacked Google for explanations. I plugged I plugged my symptoms into various medical search engines. I kept trying to search diagnosis, to put a name to what was wrong with me. When the answer was right under my nose, I'd met so many soldiers, so many young men and women suffering from post-traumatic stress, and I'd heard them describe how hard it was to leave the house, how uncomfortable it was to be around other people, how excruciating it was to enter a public space, especially if it was loud. I'd heard them talk to a shop about timing their visit to a shop or supermarket carefully, making sure to arrive minutes before closing time to avoid the crowds and noise. I'd empathize with them deeply and yet never made the connection. It never occurred to me that I, too, was suffering from post traumatic stress. Despite all my work with wounded soldiers, all my efforts on their behalf, all my struggles to create games that would spotlight their condition, it never dawned on me that I was a wounded soldier. And my war didn't begin in Afghanistan, it began in August of 1997. All right, that's where we are going to stop for today, my friends. Mm, I think I want to go on for the hour. Let me see, 19 more minutes will still give me time. All right. Chapter 62. I phoned my friend Thomas one evening. Thomas, brother of my beloved mate Henners. Henners, let's do that again. Chapter 62. I want to go and I don't want to. It's the death. Okay. Chapter 62. I phoned my friend Thomas one evening. Thomas, brother of my beloved mate Henners. Thomas, so funny and witty. Thomas, with the infectious laugh. Thomas, the living reminder of better days. I was at Clarence's house, sitting on the floor of the TV room, probably watching Friends. Hey, Booze, what's up with you? He laughed. No one else called him Booze. Ha ha, Harris. Harris, hello. I smiled. No one else called me Harris. He said he was just leaving a business dinner. He was pleased to have someone to chat with while he was making his way home. His voice, so much like his brother's, was an instant comfort. It made me happy, even though Thomas wasn't happy. He too was struggling, he said, going through a divorce, other challenges. The conversation went inexorably to that original challenge, the wellspring of all challenges, Henners. Thomas missed his brother so much. Me too, I said. Man, me too. He thanked me for speaking at an event to raise money for Henner's charity. Wouldn't miss it. That's what friends are for. I thought of the event and the pre-event panic attack. Then we reminisced randomly. Thomas and Ennis, Willie and me. Saturday mornings, lounging around with Mummy, watching telly, having burping contests. She was like a teenage boy. She was, mate, going with Mummy to see Andrew Lloyd Webber. Me and Henners mooning the security cameras at Ludgrove. We both started laughing. He reminded me that Henners and I were so close. People called us Jack and Russell. Maybe that was because Willie and I had Jack Russells. Or I wondered where Henners might be. Was he with Mummy? Was he with the dead from Afghanistan? Was Gangang there too? I was jolted from this train of thought by the sound of Thomas screaming. Boos, mate, you okay? Angry voices, a scuffle, a struggle. I put the phone on speaker, shot down the corridor, up the stairs, burst into the police room. I shouted that my mate was in trouble. We leaned over the phone, listening, but the line had already gone dead. It was obvious Thomas was being mugged. Luckily, he had just happened to mention the name of the restaurant where he had just had dinner. It was it was in Battersea. Plus, I knew where he lived. We checked a map. There was only one logical road between those 2 points. Several bodyguards and I raced there and found Thomas on the side of the road near Albert Bridge, beaten, shaken. We took him to the nearest police station where he signed a statement. Then we drove him home. Along the way, he kept thanking me for coming to his rescue. I hugged him tightly. That's what friends are for. Chapter 65. No, chapter 63, actually. I was given a desk at Wattisham Airfield, which I hated. I'd never wanted a desk. I couldn't bear sitting at a desk. My father loved his desk, seemed pinned to it, enamored of it, surrounded by his books and mailbags. That was never me. I was also given a new task, refine my knowledge of the Apache. Perhaps on the way to becoming an instructor, that was a job I thought might be fun, teaching others to fly. But it wasn't. It just didn't feel like my calling. Once again, I broached the idea of going back to war. Once again, the answer was a hard no. Even if the army was inclined to send me, Afghanistan was winding down. Libya was heating up. Libya was eating up, though. How about that? No, the army said. In every way they knew how. Officially and unofficially, they denied my request. Everyone has had quite enough of Harry in a war zone. At the end of a typical workday, I'd leave Wattingham, drive back to Kensington Palace. I was no longer staying with Pa and Camilla. I'd been assigned my own place, a flat on KP's in Kensington Palace's lower ground floor. In other words, halfway underground. The flat had three tall windows, but they admitted little light, so the difference between dawn, dusk, and midday were nominal at best. Sometimes the question was rendered moot by Mr. R, who lived directly upstairs. He liked to park his massive grey Discovery hard against the window, blotting out all light entirely. I wrote him a note, politely asking if he might perhaps pull his car forward a few inches. He fired back a reply telling me to suck eggs. You know, the Britons have the weirdest cuss words, to suck eggs. What the hell does that mean? Then he went to Granny and asked her to tell me the same. She never did speak to me about it, but the fact that Mr. R felt felt secure enough, supported enough to denounce me to the monarch showed my true place in the pecking order. He was one of Granny's equerries. I should fight, I told myself. I should confront the man face to face. But I figured, no. The flat actually suited my mood. Darkness at noon suited my mood. Also, it was the first time I was living on my own, somewhere other than Pa's. So, on balance, I really had no complaints. I invited a mate over one day. He said the flat reminded him of a Badger set, or maybe I said that to him. Either way, it was true, and I didn't mind. We were chatting, my mate and I having a drink, when suddenly a sheet dropped down in front of my windows. Then the sheet began to shake. My mate stood, went to the window, and said, "Spike, what in the—" Falling from the sheet was a cascade of what looked to be brown confetti. No, glitters? No. My mate said, "Spike, is that hair?" It was. Mrs. R was giving a trim to one of her sons, shaking out the sheet in which she had collected the clippings. The real problem, however, was that my three windows were open and it was a breezy day. Gusts of fine air blew into the flat. My mate and I coughed, laughed, picked strands off our tongues. What didn't come into the flat landed like summer rain on the shared garden, which just then was blooming with mint and rosemary. For days I went around for days I went around composing a harsh note to Mrs. R in my head. I never sent it. I knew I was being unfair. She didn't know she was hearing me out. More, she didn't know the real source of my antipathy towards her. She was guilty of an even more egregious vehicular crime than her husband. Every day Mrs. R parked her car in Mummy's old spot. I can still see her gliding into that space, right where my mother's green BMW used to be. It was wrong of me, and I knew it was wrong, but on some level, I condemned Mrs. R for it. It's the truth. When one thing starts bothering you about somebody, it's almost like everything about them and everything associated with them has the potential to be quite bothersome. Because first it was the husband that bothered him by parking the car where he couldn't get any sunlight in his flat. And then now, after the wife dumped the hair out the window and the hair got in his flat, now he's mad at her too. And now all of a sudden, he's mad at seeing her park her car in the spot where his mom used to park hers. Oh boy. Let's move on to chapter 64. This is the last chapter, guys. Let me just prepare you. This is going to actually be the last chapter. Chapter 64. I was an uncle. Willie and Kate had welcomed their first child, George, and he was beautiful. I couldn't wait to teach him about rugby and Rorke's drift, flying, and corridor cricket, and maybe give him a few pointers about how to survive life in the fishbowl. Reporters, however, used this joyous occasion as an opportunity to ask me if I was miserable. What? The baby had moved me one link down the chain of succession, maybe me fourth from the throne instead of third. So reporters said, bad luck, hey? You must be joking. There must be some misgivings. Couldn't be happier. A half truth. I was delighted for Willie and Kate, and I was indifferent to my place in the order of succession, but nothing to do with either thing. I wasn't anywhere close to happy. That's the end of chapter 64, my friends, of part 2 of the book Spare, written by Prince Harry. I hope you all are enjoying listening to me read this book as much as I am enjoying reading it with you, to you, and for us. That's going to be it for today, my friends. Thank you all so much. Don't forget to hit the like button, share out the stream, invite your friends and your friends to come on over and listen to the readings. And once again, I sincerely appreciate all the comments. I will get back to everybody in due time. But I want to extend my sincere gratitudes to everybody. I see that you all have been listening to the reading, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thanks again, my friends, all that fluff and stuff from down under, my lovely family daily, and all the others who are in the background and not saying a word. I thank you so much as well for coming in and listening. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Trevesan, where your journey matters. Join me later tonight. I keep telling myself I shouldn't tell you, and then I keep telling, oh, so I'm not going to tell. So I'll see you all later, guys. Have yourselves a blessed day. Okay, Delia, you have yourself a great day, family, and a good night to all that fluff and stuff who is down under. Have yourselves a good day, guys. We will talk later.